You read the title, you saw the thumbnail. I think A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is peak fiction. And I'm not just saying this because Peter Claffey plays Sir Duncan the Tall is Irish. Even if that does make it even better. Fair warning in advance, I suggest you watch the show first as it is excellent. It's quite short overall, and this video will contain heavy spoilers. But I truly think this show is peak fiction. But what does one consider peak fiction? Well, I believe it is something that climaxes at the perfect time and leaves you with a satisfying conclusion that stands on its own without leaving too many loose ends. In the case of this show, it makes sense. The first 4 episodes are spent building towards the 5th episode, which is the climax of the show. And the 6th episode deals with the aftermath of that and ties up any loose ends, while also leaving us with enough to be hungry for what is to come in season 2. More than that, this show has compelling characters and a depth you mightn't expect with a fantasy TV series. Let's start by looking at the beginning, with Dunk burying his master Sir Erlen of Pennytree. He takes Erlen's sword, shield, and 3 horses, which appears to be everything they had between the 2 of them. But why didn't Dunk have his own? This leads into an overall greater question the show was asking. Was Dunk ever actually knighted? It doesn't matter if he wasn't. I'll get back to that in a bit, but to continue, he goes into a tavern where Egg is with his brother Darren, who we later find out was meant to compete in the tournament at Ashford, which Dunk is going to, but he wasn't bothered, which leads to Egg asking if he'd square for Dunk, which at this point Dunk refuses. But Egg is persistent in following Dunk, much like Dunk was as a boy with his own master, Sir Erlen. At this point we are still assuming that Dunk had been knighted by Sir Erlen, but there was just no proof of it. Dunk goes to Tansel to get his crest painted and sells his favourite horse Sweetfoot to be able to afford armour. While Egg and Dunk watch the tournament on its first day, we really see their bond grow in a number of wholesome moments, which sees us as an audience grow closer to them, makes them likeable, normal, and makes us root for them. Contrast this to Game of Thrones, where it's harder for simpler moments like Dunk and Egg sharing a sandwich to breathe in the grand scheme of things, and this narrow focus really allows these types of scenes to shine through. We also see Plummer ask Dunk if he would compete in a rigged jousting match against Sir Ashford to recoup money spent hosting the costly tournament, and Dunk is simply baffled by the request. This is again showing the good-natured side of Dunk and his view of what knights should be at their core and the values they should carry. Following that, Aeron dishonourably, mortally wounds his opponent's horse, disgusting both Dunk and the crowd. Afterwards, while Egg is watching Tansel's performance, she's attacked by Aeron, who breaks her finger. Egg's first instinct is to go round his father's men, or go to his father himself, all of whom are powerful people and would have to listen to Egg and try stop Aeron, but instead he goes for Dunk, who he is certain cannot be twisted by his brother Aeron and will act correctly as a true knight should, in an honourable fashion. So once again it shows the true character of Dunk and who he is, and what he represents. Is he a representation then of what a man should be in today's society? A fair, just, righteous person who acts accordingly and without hesitation. Dunk then finds out he's been accused by Egg's brother Daron of kidnapping Egg. He also finds out he has to do a trial by 7 against Aeron. As such, Dunk must try find 6 knights to fight beside him by dawn. Dunk thinks he is fucked, but a good man like Dunk has made friends along the way. As such, Stefan offers to fight beside him, and Egg manages to put in a good word, rounding up Lionel, Robin, Harding and Sir Humphrey, leaving Dunk just 1 man short. He also meets with Daron, who apologises, saying he had no choice, and tries to do right by Dunk by promising to intentionally fall from his horse in the bout. This leaves us with an interesting dilemma of the character of Daron. He's clearly a lazy, drunken fool who let his younger brother scamper off with a random hedge knight. But he's also clearly not as bad as Aeron, and does try to do right by Dunk, by even going out of his way to apologise to him. But does that forgive his ignorance and laziness? It's hard to say. After all of this, Stefan, we find out, has betrayed Dunk to fight by Aeron's side in exchange for a lordship. This is also a dilemma, as while I hated his decision here, I could somewhat understand it. If you were promised wealth and a title in exchange for just 1 bout, you would probably convince yourself it was the better choice. Even though you would lose Dunk's respect, you would gain the respect of others. He also will be looked down upon by the Targaryens were he to reject such a generous offer. The way he goes about telling Dunk and his own squire and cousin Raymond is what leaves such a sour taste in my mouth. Comparatively, we saw Dunk turn down a bribe earlier for a bout. Again, I feel this shows how Dunk is, at his core, a better knight, more respective of the values of a knight. Then we get to one of my favourite scenes in the show, where Lionel asks Dunk to knight Raymond, saying any knight can do it, but Dunk hesitates. It was the first time I really began to question, hang on, is Dunk not actually a knight? But I think this also leads into the greater question I've been alluding to. Does it matter? If someone acts righteously, is fair and just, and does exactly as any good knight should do, does it matter if they haven't been knighted? What does it mean in a world where so many knights don't live by that code, yet a man who technically hasn't been knighted is better than all of them? Then we get another phenomenal scene where Dunk yells into the crowd, "And there no true knight among you!" Literally asking the question I've been thinking of, what is a true knight? Baelor Targaryen then arrives, declaring he will fight for Dunk, showing even in the Targaryen family there may be some good blood outside of just Egg. Right at the start of what appears to be an epic battle, Dunk is immediately knocked off his horse, and we get to see a number of flashbacks from his childhood, where he is with his friend Rafe. They scavenge from a battlefield, even from corpses, showing a side of Dunk perhaps we didn't think could have occurred. Up to this point I would have thought Dunk was perhaps naive, innocent, and not fully experienced in the darker side of the world. But this shows something else. Dunk was once desperate and had to go places no young boy should. We then see the pair go to Flea Bottom and King's Landing, and they even pickpocket from a city watchman named Alistair. We also learn they have no family, not at this point anyways. They attempt to buy passage to the Free Cities but can't afford it. Then Alistair comes and slits Rafe's throat right in front of Dunk for her taking his dagger in an absolutely horrific scene. Then they go after Dunk, and right then Sir Ireland bursts out from a tavern in a mad display, killing both men and saving Dunk. Dunk, with nothing left, decides to trail Sir Ireland for what is presumably days until he collapses from exhaustion. This leads to another awesome scene where it mixes the present moment of Egg yelling at Dunk to "Get up, sir! Get up!" Sir Ireland telling a young Dunk to "Get up!" as well. Then we see the scene that gave me goosebumps, when the crowd chants Dunk's name as he gets up. The duel between Dunk and Aeron is brutal, a real test of physicality rather than skill, which allows Dunk to eventually overpower Aeron. This leads to Aeron having to yield and withdraw his accusation. Just as all seems right in the world, we find out Harding and Beesbury are both dead. But then there appears to be a little win for Dunk, as Lord Baelor allows Dunk to serve as his knight. Then it's revealed he has been fatally wounded by his own brother Maekar, and as the penultimate episode ends, he dies in Dunk's arms. Now the story has reached its climax. It only has one thing left to do, which is wrap up all the loose ends. Lionel offers that Dunk can come to Storm's End, but he is wallowing in his own misery and declines, claiming he only brings bad luck. Then Baelor is cremated, and his son Valar questions Dunk why he gets to live and his father died. Dunk, while still feeling sorry for himself about Baelor's death, ends up with Lionel yelling at him, saying how he put his life on the line for Dunk, and so did other men, but he doesn't consider that. Only poor Baelor. Does that mean he should value one life over another because someone is a lord? Or should he value them equally? These are questions Dunk will have to answer himself. Raymond is married to the prostitute who Dunk knew as Red, so he gets his deserved happy ending. Dunk meets with Maekar, where he says Aeron will be sent to the Free Cities to atone. He invites Dunk to Summerhall to train Egg as his squire, but Dunk declines, which Egg overhears, leading to an emotional chat with Egg afterwards. Egg sees his hair is regrowing and attempts to take a knife to kill Aeron, but in an excellent performance from Dexter Saul Ansel, he is calmed down by his father Maekar. Dunk is then seen returning to Maekar, where he asks once again if Egg can squire for him on the road, which Maekar refuses. We then go back to Raymond, who has bought back Sweetfoot for Dunk, but Dunk decides to gift her to Raymond in a really heartwarming moment. At the very end, as Dunk is leaving Ashford, we see Egg arrive and claim his father changed his mind about letting him go on the road with Dunk. The pair leave to continue their adventure to who knows where in season 2. Only for it to hilariously jump back to an angry Maekar who's realised Egg is missing. All in all, it's quite a nice, happy ending. There are a few characters dead, but no one who we grew particularly attached to. It also leaves a taste for what is left to come in the future. There is one scene I haven't discussed, which will go back to my main point once again. Earlier in the final episode, Dunk has another flashback where he questions Sir Arlen why he never knighted him. He cries as it appears this is where Sir Arlen died right before the first episode. But then he comes back to life saying,
"A true knight always finishes a story."
So we were duped into placing the scene in the wrong time. But Stu's question lingering. Was Dunk ever knighted? And even more importantly, does it matter? I think boiled down, the show really questions what does our status and title actually mean if we don't uphold the values we are meant to help others with the power we have. In the end, it doesn't matter if you're really a knight or a lord if you don't uphold your values. But if you were just a peasant who seeks to help others, you will always be a better person than any of those with titles that do nothing. And that's why I think A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is peak fiction. Thanks for watching.